This is a Chuki Beats production.
Hello guys, Matthew here and welcome back again to the Tech-Tic YouTube channel. I hope you liked that intro video. I think this chassis definitely deserves something like that, as it's a really special one in question, so I wanted to bring you that extra something along with it. I assume that you are all pretty much familiar with Inwin's 805 series, especially chassis enthusiasts and system builders among you, and that this model turned out to be quite popular due to its unique design, and that's not a rare case for Inwin, as they're pretty famous for their out-of-the-box thinking. As always, Inwin decided to take it a step further and introduced us with another very special variation of this series, the 805 Infinity. The Infinity part in that naming represents its different front panel, which is, as you saw in the intro, very interesting to say at least, mimicking a window into an almost endless-like view and replacing the original honeycomb mesh style design in the standard 805 model. Turned off like this, it still basically acts like a big mirror, while of course being particularly fingerprint happy. Overall, except that update of its front panel, the 805 Infinity isn't any different from the original. It still supports extremely clean looking and simple design, while emphasizing the left and right tempered glass side panels and breathing with excellent build quality, which pops out as soon as you lay your eyes on it. Just above that front panel, on the top front of it, you can see a dedicated area which holds your power on switch, which by the way needs a lot of force to be pressed, LED activity indicator, audio in and out jacks, and two USB 2.0 and two USB 3.1 ports, one of which is a USB Type-C one. Moving further along the top side of the chassis, you can see that we have a clear brushed aluminum surface without any ventilation hole, meshes or fan installation spots. On the bottom you will find big plastic stand-off feet, one on the front and one on the back, with small rubber paddings on them. You can also notice that there is an easily removable magnetic dust filter, but it's not for the power supply, but rather for the middle to front part of the chassis. More on that later on. That's basically the only dust filter, so you'll be pretty busy with keeping it clean, especially on account of the brushed aluminum frame in combination with tempered glass, which both have PhDs in being a fingerprint magnets. As with pretty much any other chassis with tempered glass side panels, for holding them in we have 4 thumb screws sitting in each corner, and after undoing them you'll need to position the glass at around 45-degree angle to pull them out, as that bottom section serves as a sort of latch point. The glass itself sits on a rubber padding, and you will get few of those extra in the accessory box in case the pre-installed ones go bad. Taking a look inside of the chassis, you can see that we have an ample of space for accommodating some serious hardware. The main backbone of the inner part is of course the motherboard tray, covered as you can see with a lot of cutouts and empty space surrounding it. I like how they made this bottom protruded bracket more as a design detail rather than it having some function, beside maybe marking the bottom edge border of the motherboard and the end point of the 8th expansion slot. Too bad they didn't put some thumb screws on them for easier installation. Below that you will find a spot for the power supply with, as I said, no dust filter below it, as its orientation in this case is meant to be with the fan facing up. Again, you will find that dust filter on the bottom front end of the chassis, which is partially covered by the drive bay. That bay can actually be completely removed by undoing 4 screws holding it in place, the last one being pretty tricky to get. You have to remove the front standoff leg completely and then you'll get access to it. I wish they've made that a bit simpler, especially since it's only one screw in question. After you're done with that, you can either remove it from the chassis or put it vertically onto this fan frame on the front, which can beside the drive bay itself hold two 120 or 140mm fans or a 280mm radiator. They've actually marked up the installation spots on that same frame, and that aluminum piece is also removable, so if you wish to clean up that right portion of the chassis completely, you can. The cage itself can carry two 3.5-inch drives in these handy toolless slots, or three 2.5-inch drives, the third one being this easy to install drive bracket on the cage itself. The only problem with removing both the drive cage and the fan frame, beside obviously losing the 3.5-inch drive support, is that you will be left out of that additional space for tucking in the access power supply and other cables. On the other hand, removing that, you will also free up the bottom placement for the two 120mm fans to be installed right over that dust filter. That said, as you've probably noticed, you won't get a lot of cooling options. One pre-installed 120mm fan on the back, which is actually pretty decent, particularly noise-wise, while in terms of the installation spots that we mentioned, overall you can say that it's pretty modest. Behind the right side panel, on the back side of the motherboard, we have a decent amount of legroom for doing a proper cable management. As you can notice, we don't have any protruded hook points, but rather these small holes through which you can run zip ties, while you can also stick these plastic cable clamps from the bundle where you wish to. As you've probably noticed, back there you will also find a total of three 2.5-inch drive trays with same installation process like that inside one. Overall, cable management will not be a small task, especially if you don't plan to use that drive bay. The main challenge of course lies in the fact that the right side panel is also completely transparent on account of the tempered glass, although this one is decently tinted, so it helps somewhat, but still try to keep it as neatly as possible as there's zero free space for cable hiding. Although there's plenty of access points and cutouts for the cables, it did take me some time to finish up the cable management, especially when you need to do it as clean as possible as everything is on display. Thankfully, I didn't use any of those back trays, so that helped a bit, but again you still need to connect the extra power and control cable for the Infinity panel, and on the right side panel the white glowing InWin logo, which needs a Molex power connection. I've decided to use their added cable adapter from the bundle, which uses SATA power and USB data connection for controlling and powering up the Infinity panel, instead of connecting that cable directly to the motherboard, since my Gigabyte Z270X Gaming 5 motherboard has a RGB LED header with 5 pins, while the chassis cable itself has 4 pins, so it didn't sit completely right, although it would work in theory. Plus, I was using the RGB LED strip which came in the bundle with the chassis, so it was more convenient for me to use that aforementioned adapter cable, as it has a split connection for two different end devices. With everything inside, you can see that we have plenty of room left. The chassis is more than spacious enough, even for a taller air CPU cooler, and mine was just few millimeters off from the side panel. There's enough space for a longer graphics card and power supply, and putting the cable management on the side, it's really accessible in terms of installing your hardware in it. Overall, I was very pleased with the chassis being filled and how it looked. Yes, there are some cables visible, but in this case that's basically impossible to avoid. If you go for a black cable combination, like I did with my Seasonic Prime power supply, you'll probably end up with a more seamless look, although I don't know why did InWin went with this colorful cable for the Infinity RGB control. That's the only thing that poked me in the eye. Closing everything up, as these are tempered tinted like glass panels in question, you can actually barely see what's inside of the chassis from the outside, especially in a well-lit room, but that's where all those LEDs in it come to life. Most of my components, from the graphics card, motherboard to RAM, are filled with it, so everything takes a different look once turned on and sets up a cool scene when you have such view of the inside. As I mentioned, you'll get an RGB LED strip, but since it's pretty long, it's hard to place it as there's no clean and straight line around the edge of the chassis. The only option that I saw for placing it is once you remove the drive cage, which then opens up that outer side edge without any physical interruptions, so it fits perfectly. All of that coupled with the gorgeous Infinity Glass effect on the front panel with its lighting and LEDs, you will get a complete, very satisfying and before all unique look. controlling the lighting itself, InWin provides their Halo software utility. It's still a bit rough on the edges user interface design-wise, but it gets the job done. Here you can choose among few different effects, like breathing, strobing, color cycle and so on, or you can create a personal profile based on those effects, but with different time intervals, for example. You can also determine brightness and of course the color, but unfortunately you cannot independently control the RGB LED strip and the infinity panel. They all act like one part. Being a unique chassis as it is, you'll of course be greeted by its also very unique price point. At the moment it's roughly double the price of the plain 805 series, which is definitely not for everyone, but for those who really know what they want, like for example this special infinity panel in the case of this model, and they are also willing to pay for it. In any other scenario, it would almost be impossible to justify its purchase. That's it guys for this time from me. Thank you once again for watching. Feel free to toss me a thumbs up if you like what you saw, that really helps me a lot. Leave a comment down below if you have any questions about this product or if you want to leave your suggestions. And of course feel free to subscribe for content further down the line, or you can check out some of my other videos from before. Until then, catch you later guys.